Hello, everyone. Welcome to a book-based interview where today we talk to author Kaye Rockwell. Kaye is an author who specializes in creating romance stories that balance happy ever afters with life lessons you won't forget. If at any point you're interested in following Kaye's journey, feel free to check out her Instagram at the Nomad Dreamer, TheNomadDreamer, and that's also her handle on TikTok, as well as author Kaye Rockwell on Facebook. And also, if you do enjoy this type of content from us, please feel free to like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. But Kaye, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So I love asking, the first questions that we ask in these interviews. I always love to talk about, the origin story. And I know, according to your bio, it says that you discovered the love of reading pretty early from your mom. And I just wanted to ask, what were some childhood books that you remember being your favorites? And do you remember any stories that helped you serve as an influence for the novels you write today?
It wasn't so much the books.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just my mom had this thing where she had us read a book and then write an essay about like a book report.
Right.
So like I remember after she had passed, my sister tried to like keep that going on, but we just weren't having it. Like me and my little sister, we just were like, no, we just want to like read what we want from now on because we were raised on the classics like when I was a very little, my favorite author was Charles Dickens. Like I just loved it. A Tale of Two Cities, still my favorite novel. I love it. I adore it. We were a very musical family as well, so I think that that was a natural progression. And growing up in the Philippines, art is very, very important to everybody. So maybe TV, movie, film, books, most especially, they're very much a part of everyone's homes. So it wasn't if I would go to my friend's house, I wouldn't be like, oh, you don't read? No, everybody reads. So it wasn't one particular book that I really like. I think it was just the community
Right.
that I grew up in where everyone just read. Like we would all just like sneak books underneath, our tables, and just read while we're in class and stuff. And then we were also encouraged to read. We had two libraries on my school. Um, and we just hung out there all the time. It was the cool thing to do. I think I'm very lucky in that way that my whole life I've always thought that reading was cool. It's never been like the nerdy or anything like that. For me, no, it's always been cool.
Oh, that's great. I think that's very different from my experience reading because I think when I was in school, I kind of saw it as when somebody would force me to read a novel and it was like a classic. Like I remember Great Expectations, and every week we would have to answer a quiz, and I remember some of these questions just beating me up because I used to be a part of the water polo team and I would also do like other things in high school. So I remember, sometimes like not spark noting it and kind of like getting the gist of it because sometimes it was really hard to read the language. Like the diction
Hmm.
back then is just completely different. And I remember just like not doing well in these quizzes and I was like, I hate Great Expectations. And I remember being in other classes, and I just think that in high school I felt like so many teachers, instead of kind of promoting the love of reading and kind of encouraging like the beauty of what these stories tell, it was more about a comprehension check because we had to understand these themes so we can get good grades on this test. And what I do understand, the logic behind it. I think there's a lot of emotional attachment that comes to reading that I think I just didn't really have when I was younger, because every time I thought about reading, it was an assignment instead of it being like the cool activity that you're talking about where everybody would want to meet up at the library and hang out. And I think that's really cool how, depending on, I know we just talked about this earlier, but depending on where you grow up and like your communities, like it really affects how you look at other forms of media. And I also can relate with art being really important in your culture, because for Indian people, I think with Bollywood movies, I if there's one thing I know that every Indian household has, it is probably a copy of a very famous Indian movie, because movies, film, TV, it's very big in our culture. And I think it's great how you kind of saw inspirations in your culture to help reflect in your reading, even if it wasn't literature. TV, film, or just being around other people would like help affect your stories. And I guess this kind of leads to the second part of this question. Did you always want to be an author, or was this something that you discovered later on in your life?
No, I initially actually wanted to be like an actress.
Oh.
Because my parents had an advertising agency in the Philippines. And for a few years, my dad was actually the president of the advertising board
Oh,
of the
wow.
Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
So I was around that constantly and I did auditions and stuff like that. Um, but I never really took it seriously because I was always just in, my dad would just throw me and my sisters in ads and stuff like that. So I was just kind of like around that up to a certain point. It was just a few years of my childhood, since my mom did get sick pretty early. Um, so it was just kind of like, I guess maybe it's a natural progression. Like after she had passed, I didn't really have a way to like express the grief that I had. So naturally we had a den in my house where we had the board games and the books and stuff like that. And as a kid, I don't know if that's nerdy or anything, but I read the encyclopedia for fun. I would just go one by one, and we just had it like kind of like A to Z in our house. So I kind of just gravitated towards that. I started reading poems and stuff like that, and I decided, I'm gonna write one. And I wrote a poem for my mom, kind of just expressing. It was called like a blank page, and I just kind of like expressed that I was just a blank page, and I just didn't know how to express my grief. Was basically what that poem was. Um, and I had given that to, or I had submitted that since I was in fifth grade and we had a poem writing assignment. And I was like, I'm just gonna submit this. And then they published it in the school newspaper and stuff like that. And so I think that was when I kind of had like, oh, maybe this is something. So I just had like notebooks, and since from then on, I just had notebooks and notebooks and notebooks of just poems. And when I was 13, I was going into sophomore year. We don't have middle school in the Philippines, or at least my school didn't. So
Okay.
we go from sixth grade to high school. Um,
Wow.
we had education is very important in the Philippines, very, very. And I went to an advanced school, so they wanted us to write a screenplay, and I was like, okay. And my dad brought home like a computer from his work, and I just started writing, and I just didn't get out. I was just there. Like I don't know if you remember, like the internet was just that whole dial-up thing. I didn't get up. I didn't even have the internet on, which is Microsoft Word. So I was like, I just want to get up. My sister was yelling, "Do you want to get up?" I couldn't get up because I had to finish the story. And then I submitted that, and then I wrote another one, and my friend submitted that. I get trouble for that. And I got 98s on both because they had encouraged us to use like the native language and stuff like that. But English had always been easier for me just because in the Philippines, in particular in our school, we had an English campaign where we don't speak in Tagalog
Oh.
unless it's Filipino class or Hekasi, which is history class. Those are the only two classes we could speak in Tagalog. And at home, we spoke in English mostly to express ourselves. We don't really speak in Tagalog that much. So I wrote both in English. And when it came back to me, they were like, you should really look at this. And my teacher was young. She was like in her 20s, like early 20s. And she happened to be the daughter of the director of the school. And she was like, look at this and see what can come from it. And then I just started writing just in little notebooks, little stories that were in my head, and it progressed into fan fiction. And from that, Charmed fan fiction. I don't know if you know that show, but it's Charmed, the witches and stuff.
Right.
And then from then on, I just kept writing and writing and writing. And till this day, kid you not, I have floppy disks from when I was in high school. Everything that I ever wrote in high school was in floppy disks. I can't access them anymore, unfortunately. But I kept the binder that I had written notes and the notebooks and stuff. I brought all of that. So when the pandemic happened, I decided, you know what? I'm gonna publish it. So I published it, and then I published the other one.
Oh
So,
my gosh. So,
so yes,
so Glad You Exist was the screenplay that you were writing for your. Oh my gosh, that is such a crazy story. I think it's really important to like bring out the fact that you had people in your school really help promote that love of writing and reading that you were kind of exploring, because I had a similar experience in my university where so the way it works in my high school was you could take exams, and if you passed you were able to get college credit at a younger age, so then when you go to college you can transfer the credits and you can kind of skip the introduction courses. But I wasn't the best at English. I mean, of course, like I can speak English, but like when it came to the courses, like I don't know, for writing, I was kind of sloppy on the essay format. I wasn't really into like writing when it came to structured analysis. Kind of noticed that I did like creative writing in high school, but it was never encouraged enough to where I kind of wanted to take it serious. And I remember because of me not doing the best on that exam, I had to take an introduction writing course. None of my friends had to take it. And I remember just thinking, man, I must be really dumb because everybody else seems like they don't need to take this course. I do. So I went to my first day. I was just really bummed. I sat in the back corner, and this professor comes and he talks about the beauty of creative writing, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, like I just want to get my grade and just get out of here. And I remember one week he asked us to write a short story, and that was going to be our final. So I was like, you know what, whatever. Like, because I didn't pay attention that much to that class, I figured I would just procrastinate and just wait until the last day to write it. So the last day, I had like maybe 6 hours left, and I was just so upset because I waited till the last minute. My friends are sleeping, and I'm in the dark just typing, and I'm drinking energy drinks just to get it done. And I turn it in, and I get this email from my professor, and he's like, I need to talk to you about this. And I'm thinking I failed because I thought I missed a requirement. So I responded back. I said, "Yeah, I'm making my way to your room right now so we can talk." And he sits down with me and he told me, he said, "This story was a really great story." And he asked me, he was like, can I turn this in for a fellowship, which is a program where if you get picked, you can pretty much conduct research and you can create another story where you can pretty much share with the board of directors that are in charge of that fellowship to kind of share, like, hey, these are what our students are doing. And I told him, I said, yeah, we can apply for it, but I don't know if I'm going to win. And I applied for it and I did get it. And I think, I actually didn't end up following through with that fellowship because my grandfather passed away around that time. So it was just a lot of work. But I remember, even to this day, that, when I go about BookBase and I go about writing, if it wasn't for that professor really, coming to me and saying, hey, like, this is really interesting, I don't think I would have explored this side of literature and writing for me, where I saw the benefits of reading and kind of seeing the influences and turning into writing. I think for a long time, I was like, oh, that stuff is kind of for, for a different group of people. I don't know if that's really for me. So I think that's great how when you were growing up, you had a bunch of people also, kind of express that, hey, you should go for it, push for it. And I think it's still hilarious how you have like floppy disks of like all your stories and stuff. I think you can still get a reader if you really want to get
I bought one. I bought one,
oh.
heard it, but it just, I think it's because it's so old. I mean, I graduated in 2004, so it's like literally really old floppy disk. Unfortunately, yeah, my husband tried. I had a friend who was really good with electronic and technology stuff try. We just couldn't get it.
Oh
But like Glad has been in my hand since I was 13. I'm almost 40 now. So it's
right.
like I've always kind of gravitated back to it whenever I was in a really, a dark place.
Mm-hmm.
Like Glad You Exist has a lot of stuff that I went through. What I now understand as an adult was depression and grief and
Right.
anxiety, a little bit, maybe a little bit of PTSD from, losing a parent, and watching your parent die for years in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that during the pandemic, when I had nothing else, and I had just had a daughter, and all I had was I hadn't, and mind you, I hadn't. When I moved to America, I started reading, like really, really, really reading.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably read like at least 10 books a week.
Oh
I
my
was so
gosh.
depressed. I missed the Philippines. I went to the same school for 12 and a half years. I missed my friends. I was in a 16 years old going to college with people who were way older than I was. I was taking nursing. Filipino nursing.
Yeah.
I was told to. I wanted to be a journalist. I kind of like gravitated. It was kind of like making my way there. And I was just so sad. And after I had started working a few years later, I stopped reading because you're in America, you're fending for yourself, you're trying to, kind of like make a life for yourself and build a career and stuff. So I did
Right.
not have time for reading, um, unfortunately. But when I had my daughter, and the pandemic happened, and I was told that I couldn't, I had too many chronic illnesses for me to even go out, like that during the, beginning of COVID.
Right.
I gravitated back towards the books that I used to write, and my husband, along with some members of his family, they bought me a Mac, and it was Christmas, and literally January 1st, I sat down and I was like, let me do this. And I felt it out, and that's when I found Bookstagram, the Bookstagram community, and I just read and read and read until I was like, you know what? I feel comfortable. Let me pull out the floppy disks. And it worked. So I was glossing over and I was like, you know what? The story's been in my head for so long. Let me just write it down. And it took me, I want to say 2 to 3 months to just kind of like go from the teenage story of Glad You Exist to an adult kind of version of it.
Mhm.
And that's when I realized, you know what? I had depression a lot younger than I thought, and all these things that happened in the initial story kind of like molded and was like, you know what? This could actually be something. And then I sent it out to a couple of readers that I had become friends with, some authors that I had become friends with on Bookstagram, and I literally was receiving so many videos of people crying. I was receiving messages from friends' kids that had read it saying, you know what, feel it. It it's not talked about as much in our family, but I have it. I need to go talk to a counselor. Maybe I need to change my course, my major, and see if it'll help, alleviate a little bit of this weight that I'm feeling. And to this day, I published Glad You Exist in 2022.
Mhm.
I sent out arcs in 2021. And until this, I still receive messages from people reading. I
Wow.
still have people coming up to me at conventions and stuff saying they read my book, and wow, like it's pretty heavy for a pink book.
Yeah.
So, you know, and if anybody out there has this book, just know there's triggers, so be careful. Um, but yeah, so I think that was like that kind of cemented, and my husband is my biggest champion ever. So he encouraged it and encouraged it. And I'm just pretty lucky, I think, that even though I had a little bit of that weight from my dad saying maybe you need to take nursing because you'll have a better life, to now being a mom, not being that career person that I was in my 20s, who worked, and did nothing but work, um, to now being able to raise a daughter with the right mindset, with her being free to just be herself no matter what that is, you know, to having a husband who has, you know, kind of like is not the societal norm. He's very much a proud feminist and a proud girl dad. So I think I'm just very lucky in that aspect that I was able to kind of move past all of that. I still carry a bit of weight, um, but actually find my love of the written art again. It's hard, it's tough work. I'm an indie author, I'm an
Yeah.
Asian American indie author. It is hard, it is tough, especially when you say, yes, it has Filipino culture in it. Yes, there are times that they speak Tagalog in it. It's tough selling that book, but to receive that one email saying that I need to seek counseling. And I didn't realize that I was having those thoughts, and your book helped me out. What's a bigger validation than that? Like,
Yeah.
it's not monetary, it's just deep, and I'm
Absolutely.
full of gratitude that I'm able to do that. And though it is hard and though it is tough and financially you don't really like move from where I was before, but this is kind of like something that I can leave, when I'm not here anymore, leave something for my daughter as well. So I think in that aspect that I've found the true kind of like what I really want to do with my life, and everything else kind of comes second. Oh, well, my motherhood first, motherhood and, supporting my husband. But literally writing and books are just everything, you know.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. Like everything. I think it's really powerful that, you're able to go through many moments of like difficulty and be able to express that in your writing enough to where other people can notice that in their lives as well. I think when it comes to grief and loss and pain, it's really hard to understand the exact details of what someone's feeling, but I think this is why I love the arts. We always have this weird natural ability to at least be able to relate and use sympathy to kind of understand the groundwork of what people are kind of expressing. And this is why I used to really love like music, and that's why I love like a lot of Bollywood films and music. I always used to say to my friends that Indian, for me at least, like Hindi music and movies for me sometimes translate like love better than English movies sometimes, because there's just so much emotion that I just really capture from a lot of media in Indian culture. And I think it's the same way with reading as well, where sometimes I'll read a book and it will bring up something that I didn't even realize was something to bring up. Because I think when you're living life, you just assume everything's natural. Like, oh, this is supposed to be like this. Like, I'm supposed to think like this. I'm supposed to feel like this. This is normal. And then you read somebody else's perspective and then you start understanding that not only are they different in, better ways, but I mean, not in better ways, but like in different ways, but also that like the way that you thought, like the things that you thought were normal in reality, like it was just an indicator for something else. And I think that's great how somebody emails you and they say like, hey, like this was such an impactful story. And I agree with you. I think that email that you get occasionally will always be better than being a New York Times bestseller. And I've even heard this from other authors as well, where people sometimes, like when they're writing stories, you always ask, like, what are you writing for? Are you writing for money? Are you writing for, like crazy book deals? And it's amazing how many people will say, I write for that one person that can relate to the story. And I think that's the most important part, where it may not be the most successful book in terms of sales, but if it changes one person's life, like absolutely, I agree, that would be the biggest form of validation, because you're actually affecting somebody's life for in a better way, where they see this and they go, wait a minute, I also want to take further steps depending on what the situation is that they can relate to. And yeah, I just think that's such a great story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I hope that this journey that you're starting like just keeps on getting better, where as you explore motherhood and you become a better partner with your husband, that you start seeing other stories and maybe you can create better. I think it'll be cool when your daughter gets to an age where you create a story based on her, where it's her character and you're watching her grow and you're like, wait a minute, like maybe this is inspiring me to write another form of story. And I think just being present in life, I think, can give so much inspiration and so much gratitude for what you have around you, and I think that'll be affected in your writing as well. So yeah, I actually had a question about you writing Glad You Exist when you were 14 years old, but you just broke all of that down, and I just wanted to say thank you so much. Like, that's a really great story.
So much. And I do want to share. My mother actually passed 27 years ago today.
Oh wow, okay.
So and I didn't even realize when I had to do the May 6th. I didn't think about it. It wasn't like something that I jumped immediately to and was like, oh, might be a little tough. It's not. I mean, yeah, I did shed a few tears today,
Yeah,
but no, I don't know what it is, but I just no matter what, I feel like it's her little nudge, kind of like, hey,
yeah.
hi, you can do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think
And this
you're.
book,
Yeah.
oh, so
No,
sorry,
no,
what
no.
were you
I was
saying?
just gonna say, I think your mom would be incredibly proud of just seeing that everything you've been through. Even going to America, focusing on nursing, and going through all your trials and tribulations, and you come out of it being a healthy mom, healthy partner, and even being, an author that's influencing just sometimes strangers. I think that like I know it's on her anniversary. I mean, of her death, but I think the fact that 27 years later after her death, you are who you are. I think that's an incredible story, and I think that's amazing how now that you're a mom, it's, you get to create that relationship with your daughter, and I think that just makes it even more priceless. So I think that's great. Like, it all just works out, I feel like, where, like whatever happens in the past ends up translating to opportunities in the future. And yeah, I think that's great.
I mean, especially for the Filipino, and Asian American communities, it's really, really tough. And like all you said, like you gravitate towards Bollywood a lot more,
Hmm.
and it kind of means a lot more. Like for me, it's like the same. We have the Filipino channel, and my husband and I we watch it all the time, and the music, I
Yeah.
feel like Tagalog has more words in their language, in the language,
Hmm.
to kind of express love a lot more than English does. And
Right.
I love English. English is my favorite subject. But being able to express yourself in Tagalog,
Hmm.
especially when you're at conventions and you're wearing the bolero, and you have five Filipino Americans that would have just walked by you if they didn't realize that you were wearing the bolero,
Yeah.
and they're screaming and they're saying, "Oh my God, are you Filipino?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am." And so are they. So it's a lot, it's very fulfilling, I think, to be able to do that and be that, and to have my daughter witness it. Oh my gosh. She was at Irwindale. Unfortunately, she doesn't really, she can't go inside during the conventions because there are a lot of not safe for work artwork around,
Right.
but for her to see me chasing a dream, I hope that kind of like translates to her when she's grown up, to know that no matter what, she is allowed to be herself,
Yeah.
allowed to do what she wants, to be who she wants, you know. And that is something I'm very lucky that my partner always, my husband also shares that sentiment. And that she sees that in both my husband and I, that we're able to kind of like gravitate away from the Filipino American norm with the medicine, and the being a nurse or being a doctor, lawyer, type of thing, and seeing that even the two of us, if the two of us can chase our dreams, so can she.
Yeah.
I so I think that I'm very lucky in that aspect, and I really hope that if there are Filipino Americans seeing this, or if there's somebody in the Philippines seeing this, because that is my dream. That is my dream, is to bring these books to the Philippines, where mental illness and mental health is not talked about and is frowned upon, and is they don't understand it, and it hurt and it sucks because I was that girl who didn't understand it,
Right.
but I was lucky enough to be surrounded by adults and teachers that did, and that knew, stuff that happened in my life, and they pushed me in a very, very healthy way to do things that would help me deal with that grief. And I really, really hope that someday I'm able to bring these books back to the motherland, in a way that kind of like reaches more than just the few family and friends that I have, back home.
I think if you brought that up when you first started writing, maybe it'd be a little bit harder to kind of visualize the path to get there. But I think where you're at right now, I think you're on the way of doing that because, the fact that you're going to conventions and people already identify, the fact that you are Filipino, I think if you can do it here, I think you can totally do it back home because I think it's really important when especially comes to Asian cultures that you express the idea that it's okay to have an identity outside of the culture as well. Because I feel like sometimes, like especially me being Indian, there's a lot of roles that come into play with like who you are and who you're related to and what you have to do. But I think the second that you start expressing a want to be your own person outside of that, they kind of see it as disrespect when when it doesn't really mean that way. Like, you're not trying to say I reject my culture. You're just saying, hey, I'm somebody else outside of what I need to do as my traditional role. And I think that's great how in your stories and even in your life story you're promoting that for your daughter and for other people, because I think that's very important, where you're giving younger audiences that may be in Asian cultures and in Asian communities to kind of understand that, hey, I'm not disrespecting what my parents taught me because I happen to like something that might not be as popular, or hey, I like something that might not be as easy to communicate. And especially when it comes to things like identity and like understanding who you are, I feel like sometimes, it's great to have somebody out there to kind of say, hey, I reason with this person, I can understand it, and it helps me develop my own character. And yeah, I just think that's great, and I think it will happen. I think there will be a day we'll be able to share your stories in the Philippines, because I think there's nothing cooler than hearing about somebody's journey where they came from your land, they went to another place, they had their story, and they came back to say, hey, look at what I learned, look what I found out, and I want to share this with you. I think that's a very important, you know I think it's a very important obligation for those that are willing to do it. But I think the fact that like you're so excited about it and that's your dream, I think it will happen. I think you will manifest it to where something beautiful might happen, where you might meet some more people that will continuously just be like, hey, like I really love your stories, I'm gaining so much from it, and it just keeps on growing. And that's what a community is all about. It always starts off with a small amount of people, but that's never the indicator for the potential of it. It's always time that tells you like exactly what's going to happen. And yeah, I think that's great. I think it's going to happen, and I think this kind of segues into our next question, because I kind of feel like this is kind of on the topic, but I wanted to ask, what life lessons have you implemented in your journey as a writer, and what new lessons have you gained through your journey of being an author?
Um, I think at the beginning, especially when I wrote God You Exist,
Mm-hmm.
um, I had a plan. I had written like a calendar of things that I was going to be doing after I had released God You Exist, a timeline of the books. I was going to stick with the series, then slowly gravitate towards honest the With You series. But I did not. I actually did wrote, in case you didn't know, I think it took me 6 weeks. I was in a really bad place after Glad You Exist got published, because I was receiving, but maybe not receiving, I was seeing things that that people were leaving, and they're not like, I've not actively sought them out. I think some people reported it and it's not on there anymore. But because I am of mixed heritage, I'm mostly Filipino, but I have a lot of other, things in me. I'm also Irish American and, Chinese Hispanic, and I just got told that I had a little bit of Italian. I really don't know, but my parents are both mixed. So even though I am mostly Filipino and I grew up in the Philippines and I speak fluent, Tagalog, um, I got a lot of messages that were saying that I was promoting my books as Asian American, not Asian American. So that was like, what? I'm like, that kind of like stopped me for a bit, because growing up in the Philippines, I was never Filipino. I was always the white girl. I'm only a little bit, my last name is Rockwell. It's my dad's last name. Um, but then when I moved to America, I was not white.
Yeah.
I was something else.
Mm-hmm.
And it was never quite specific. But I've always said I was Filipino American because that's what I knew. I spoke the language, I ate food. I grew up in the Philippines. So when I promoted my book, and I did start with Amazon because of Kindle Direct Publishing, they chose to put it as Asian American. I didn't write that. you know, I have no control, and any of the indie authors can attest that, and we have no control over what, you know, Amazon will label our books on. We're allowed to put like keywords and stuff like that. And I did put Filipino, and Asian, but I didn't market it as
Right.
Asian American until a certain point when I was giving out ARCs. I actively sought out Asian American readers and Asian readers from other countries. I had, you know, somebody from India, somebody from Hong Kong, somebody from the Philippines. And I actively sought that because I knew that representation was important. Because that was one of the things that was the reason why I started writing in the first place, because I never saw anybody like me in the books, and I gravitated towards that. I have a lot of mixed identity issues that happen as an adult, and that was very concerning for me because I didn't want my daughter to feel that way. Obviously she's a lot more Filipino than I am, and I don't Filipino, but having, being told that you're not Asian, being told that you're not Filipino, you're mixed, on the comments there, people giving you ones because of it, rating your books really low because of it, and not knowing that these people, I don't think even read the book, to begin with. And art for me, I've learned with the first three books that, reading is subjective, not to take everything so, so sensitively. I put a lot of myself in my books, so I think that that's what the reason was.
Mm.
But I know that art is subjective and we all, take it in different ways and it all, but to have blatant racist attacks were kind of really crazy for me. So I think that that put me in a really dark place. And I wrote, in case you didn't know, romantic suspense, that for some reason alienated some of my readers because they thought, oh, I was going to stay with a contemporary romance, kind of feel YA feel. But then I wrote a romantic suspense. I veered very, different. A YA and a romantic suspense. Those are my two books. People didn't know which box to put me in after that. And I think I did that to myself, maybe. But, in case you didn't know, Till This Day is the book that I sell out at every event. People just gravitate, a lot more readers gravitate towards it because it's like a palate cleanser
Right.
from all the either the sweet or the spice and stuff like that. And I think that that helped me a lot because I gained a bunch of new readers that I was able to keep until now. I still have messages with them. Some I text, some I've met at events or gone to events with and stuff like that. But that was very difficult for me. That was the lesson, was not to seek validation from people's comments and people's uh for some reason strong opinions about
Right.
who someone should be and who someone should represent. I don't I'm not saying that I represent all Filipino Americans. I am saying that I represent a Filipino American just like me, who is actively seeking out the validation from being Filipino and American. Where do they stand? Where's the gray in between that they're apparently being shoved into?
Right.
It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. This whole argument about who can be Filipino American and who can say they're Filipino is nuts.
Yeah.
Um, and I hope that we get to a certain point where people like me who don't necessarily look like it, um, or people like some of my peers who don't speak Tagalog but are Filipino American, can be accepted as such without any of these remarks, without anybody questioning their identity or invalidating their existence, I think. And I think that that's why that's another important thing, is that I've learned that nobody cheers for you harder than a Filipino American author. It took me a few maybe like a year and a half, 2 years to find that community and be in that community, and it's insane.
Yeah.
Nobody rocked harder than them, and I am in such great company, having been able to write with them, put out a book with them, do events with them, celebrate Filipino joy and erase the Filipino from that and just say joy.
Yeah.
A book about love, it's a book about joy, it's a book about culture, but not necessarily just that one tagline. You know what
Right.
I mean? Hard. Sorry, I went off on a tangent
No,
because
no, no, no.
very like,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's totally relatable because I think this is important for anybody that decides to ever step foot into the world of art, because I think to create art is to, in some form, be vulnerable because you're expressing yourself. And one thing that I think I was able to pick up from your story was, I think you were constantly forced to be put in a box, whether it was through your racial identity or if it was through the genres of stories you're writing. And I feel like the problem is never when people put you in that box. I think the problem is when you internalize it. Because when you internalize that, I think it limits your perspectives and it kind of diminishes your own ability to really express yourself. And I think it's such important advice that, to say, if you're going to be the one to kind of go out of the box and kind of create, like anything that has to do outside of what people will assume you're going to create, I think it's kind of one of those things where, like to kind of have that thick skin, because what people are saying, it doesn't mean that's who you are. That's just what they are interpreting. And it's a shame that we live in a world where there are ugly comments like that out there in the world. But you know, people that truly want to do great things should never be hindered by that. They should still be able to just push on from it. And it sucks, and I could totally relate, because for me, I'm Fiji Indian. So it's weird because culturally I'm Fijian. My family, like blood wise, they're Indian, but culturally we're Fijian. And it's so hard to explain that to mainland Indian people, because I've even heard comments where people be like, "Oh, I didn't know there were Indian people even in Fiji." And it's kind of weird because you have to communicate what the differences are, and they do see the difference, whether or not you want them to or not, they'll see it. But I think one thing that I'm really grateful for is that I saw people in my life that weren't afraid to express it. And I think that's what you're doing. You're not afraid to express who you are, which makes it so much easier when you are coming up in life and you see somebody doing it. It just makes it so much easier. Oh, wait, she's doing it. I want to do it too. But to be the trend breaker where you're kind of like the first one to notice that there's not a lot of, expression in the Asian American reading community, or maybe you're not seeing books that have characters that you can relate with. When you are that person creating that form of art, it's always going to be hard because you're doing something that doesn't even exist, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. So I think it's very powerful to, kind of share that message. I don't think it's a tangent at all. It's incredibly valuable information, because in today's world where I feel like people are being even more judgmental on what box you're being put into, you have to be willing to kind of put that aside and say, let them think that this is my life, and I want to create something for other people. And I've always lived off the idea where if you're just doing something that you love and you're not hurting people and you're just focusing on something that you want to create, I don't think you're a bad person for that. I think the labels that people put on you, that's on them. If anything, that shows how ugly maybe their perspectives are in life. But it's only harmful to you when you internalize it. So I think it's great that you're promoting, this mentality where it's like, I don't need your validation because I have it, and whatever I'm lacking, I have such a great support group to kind of make up for those moments where I might have a down day. And I think as long as you have good people and you are a good person and you believe in the good out there in the world, I just feel like you can't really do any wrong. So I think that's really great how you're able to express that. And again, thank you for sharing that, because I think it's really important for anybody that wants to be in this space as a writer, as a musician, or as anybody that wants to work in the arts. You have to have that thick skin, or else it's going to be even more hard to express yourself.
Yeah, and that's what they don't tell you.
Right.
When you first get into the industry, they don't tell you that. And I'm very lucky because I had, author friends very early on, did not gatekeep. They told me everything
Mm.
I needed to know. They gave me the support I needed. They championed so much for me that I was one of 10 authors who did, a romance anthology when there's so many Filipino American authors. And I was privileged enough to be one of them and to be friends with authors that I, used to fangirl about. I mean, their books are in my shelves, and I can't tell you the faces that I made when I was in that first Zoom call with my favorite authors, staring at them, collaborating on a book, and you're just like, oh, I can't talk, I can't speak, I can't look her in the eye, that kind of thing. It's
Mhm.
very, very cool. And I think it's just an honor and to just be in the culture in itself, but also to have lived in the culture, because there's nobody in my experience more loving than Filipino people, you know. So I am just very, very privileged that I was able to grow up in the Philippines before I moved here,
Right.
because that just made it so much different. And it made me appreciate it a lot more, that when I take my daughter there, she knows that it's home.
Right.
It may not be where she was born, but it is home to her, and to have her grow up learning the language when so many kids don't know, so many adults walking around that don't know how to speak, beautiful language. Um, I think that that's just a privilege that I really hope that everybody kind of takes from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I second that. I do think Filipino people are some of the most loving people in the world because when I was in my MBA program, we had this international student. Her name was Miriam, and she was from the Philippines. And even to this day, I miss her laugh. Like, it's so contagious, just how happy she
Yeah.
was. I think there were moments where, we were taking exams. I'd be so depressed because I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm going to fail. And she'll be right next to me and she's like, I think I'm going to fail. And she's just start laughing. And I'm like, why are
Yeah.
you so happy? Like, this is such a bad thing. She goes, I tried my best. I don't know what's going to happen, but we'll see. And she was just such a happy go lucky person. And even today, like, sometimes I'll be walking down the street and I'll hear somebody that laughs like her. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, is Miriam here? And I think she always talked about her culture and where she was from. And she even said that she was like, we're actually some of the most loving people in the world. And, I always used to mess with her and be like, yeah, sure, sure, but you're so mean. Yeah, I would always mess with her. But it's true. It's true. And I think that's great how, you guys have that culture of just love and positivity, which even furthers the point where it's like, I think you're doing such a great job because the fact that you're getting emails from people that say like, hey, I see that, you're meeting authors that see that, and you have family and peers that see that. I think that's like the biggest um evidence that you can have to prove that you are the person that you think you are. It's when people around you are saying the same thing because you're not influencing their thoughts. That's their honest opinion, and I think that's great. And I think that, I think this journey that you're on, I think is only going to get better, and I just think it's so exciting. And I actually, this leads to like the next question that I wanted to ask is, what's in the future for you? Because I feel like, you have so many missions, but, like, what's coming up for you that you feel like that, like, of course, if you feel comfortable sharing. I don't know if it's something that you have in the secret that you're working on,
Oh,
but
I've
yeah.
actually announced it, but unfortunately my health kind of like took a dive over the last year. I had gone back to work and quickly realized that my body just can't do it
Mm,
at the same capacity that I used to be able to do it. I can do the work, no problem. I it's been my career, and in case anybody was wondering, I had managed restaurants and hotels, restaurants as well. So I am the hotel restaurant management business. I tried to go back into it very little by little. I had accepted a smaller position, and because I wanted to kind of like find my way in it, it did not happen.
mm,
So my intentions of releasing books kind of like took a you know were in the back burner because of all these newfound things that they have diagnosed me with. Um but I am still in that timeline. I just don't know exactly when. Right now the goal is to publish the second book in the With You series. So honest with you, Forever with You is on Kindle.
mm.
It is exclusive on Kindle, and it's a shorter version because I just wanted to kind of like give people something kind of look forward to. But I am publishing a paperback that is the extended edition with everything that everybody has been asking for.
That's
Where
awesome.
is the enemies to lovers secret marriage book? It is coming. It is coming. I have been slowly working on it. Unfortunately, I did suffer a fall a couple months ago, so it has been really difficult. This is, I think, the longest I've been able to like stare at my laptop since January. But I am working towards it. I am training myself again to be able to do it. And I am going back into therapy for my hands as well, so that I can go back to it. Unfortunately, I didn't foresee any of these happening, but I am still in that timeline. Forever with You is going to be published um, before Stimulant in October. That will happen. And I am still releasing The Romantasy, which was the charmed fan fiction I wrote when I was 13.
That's
So
awesome.
that is still coming. It will be in a short form, short stories, kind of. So basically, kind of like the episodes when they're coming out, they're
Yeah.
going to be like that. Because that is where I fell in love when Charm was coming out with the books and stuff like that as well. I did do that. I did read those as well, and I wanted to kind of like honor that and celebrate that as a millennial. That's kind of what we got growing up. And then I will finish the With You series and then jump into the college duet that I had coming out initially. That will come out next year. I'm gonna take a break from With You. I want to give the characters some time to kind of like simmer.
Mhm.
Um, And then at some point, I can't tell you when, Forevermore will have another book. Um, Forevermore, the anthology that I did publish with 10 other Filipino American authors. I will publish a short story that I have in it in its own form. And then we are talking about releasing another book together. So that's within a year or two that will probably happen.
Oh my
So that
gosh.
is my plan.
That's
That
so
is my plan.
exciting. Yeah, that is
Still
so
on the same
exciting.
plan as what it says on my website. That still goes. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you so much for being a part of this interview. I just wanted to say again, like, your story is incredibly important, and I'm really happy that you're able to share your voice and really express, everything that you've had experience up to this point, because I think there's so much to learn from it, and I really do think you are doing what you said you want to do, which is being that person for others to see as like, hey, this is who I am, this is what I'm creating. If you can relate, you know this is for you. I think you do a great job at expressing yourself, and I think other people will have an easier job understanding where you're coming from. And I just want to say again, thank you so much for being part of this interview. Again, for those that are interested in following Kaye on her journey, please check out the Nomad Dreamer on Instagram and TikTok, as well as author Kaye Rockwell on Facebook. But yeah, thank you for everything. This has been a really great interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.